everyone. Can everyone please give an amazing round of applause for these women? Start with intros real quick, and then we'll get into conversation. Starting with the lovely Kailey over here.
Hi, everyone. Okay. Just making sure it's on. I'm Kailey Kornhauser. Thank you, everyone. I'm a fat bicyclist and really excited to talk about body size inclusion tonight. So thanks for having me.
My name is Isabel Rodriguez, and I am from Mexico. I am, thank you, first generation graduate from college. I am like the immigrant child who grows up here and gets to have an education and become a teacher. And I created a dance program, and that opened up doors for me to get into mountain biking somehow. So here I am. I started mountain biking just last year without having any experience, and I work with youth to empower more women to get on bikes.
Hi, my name is Brooke, and I love introducing the joy of cycling to all folks, but especially people who look like me, so Black women.
Hi everybody, Alex Showerman here. I am a freeride mountain biker. I'm a proud queer trans woman. I ride for Pivot and Wild Rye, and kind of my mission is two key stats to know is only 20% of people know a trans person, so now you're all part of that 20%. And then another important stat is that 40% of all trans people have at one point attempted suicide, and it's like 80 to 90% have seriously thought about it, and I'm in that 80 to 90% right before coming out. I was a very dark place. So I aim to provide positive representation and educate through joy and positivity. So thank you so much for having me.
Yate, Shay Claudia Jackson in Shia. Sinajin Shlo Kiani Bushin, Turichini Dashina Hanani Dashiche, Astanishle. So I introduce myself in Navajo. I'm from the Navajo Nation. My name is Claudia Jackson. My mother is of the Black Forest people. My dad is with the Towering House people. And my grandparents are of the Water people and the Bitter Clan. So that's how I'm a woman. It sounds better in Navajo. So I started mountain biking in 2012. This will be my 9th year organizing organization called The Now We Can, and we look to empower young girls and women on bikes. And how I did that was I had to start a Girl Scout troop on the Navajo Nation to get my girls on bikes. And once I got the girls on bikes, the moms wanted to get on bikes too with their girls. And we had to sell a lot of cookies. So if you come to Sedona, you might get some cookies. Anyhow, that's I love mountain biking on the res. If you ever get a chance, you want to come out and ride some trails, just gravel roads on the res. Look me up. I'll be able to get you out riding on the res.
Thank you. I want to start off by saying that everyone here comes from very different backgrounds and different places. All of these people's stories are their own personal experiences, and no one speaks for an entire group of people. So with these perspectives, just take that in mind, listen, learn. We aren't going to have any open questions, but definitely feel free to come to any of these women. They're all comfortable with going and asking questions later and having conversations with them. So, yeah. I want to just start off by saying thank you all for being here and sharing your experiences. Conversations like this in these spaces are kind of tough, and so we're going to try to go with it as much ease and compassion as possible. And that being said, I think we all know that a lot of the biking industry is predominantly filled with a very specific type of people. And something that I don't like to hear a lot of the time is when people say it's just white men. Because I think if you look around the room, look around the stage, it is people that look like us. All of these women here, all of these events that Roam puts on, that's what the biking community is. With that being said, I know I faced my own barriers. Just being a woman in general in the biking community is a big barrier that we face. Starting, or who has the mic? Brooke? You're gonna start off. So I'd love to know your own personal experience, and everyone else too, what is a big barrier, one of the biggest barriers that you feel that you face in this community?
I think it's knowing if a space is safe or not. So the reason that a lot of people are here is because they saw a flyer and people look like them, right? And they said, whoa, this is a safe space. It's going to be all women. It's going to be great. They get really excited about that. And I think that I rarely get to see spaces where people look like me. And I get very curious around this idea of whether it's going to be safe or not. And safety is a big thing for me. And so I think one of the largest barriers for me participating in the sport of mountain biking is knowing that the space is going to be safe. Even when I'm in spaces that are all women, I mean, I would say that I'm experiencing microaggressions, like from the moment I get there to the moment I leave, right? And I know that space is trying to be safe for me, but do I really feel safe in that space? And so that's my largest barrier that I have to overcome.
Okay. So obviously coming from very different backgrounds and experiences, but that lack of representation and lack of safety is like definitely a huge part of what was my barrier. So obviously like action sports are my life. I've worked in the industry for a long time, and it was right about the time that I was breaking into the action sports industry was when I came to accept that I was trans. I've always known, like it was like my earliest memory, always knew I was a woman, but it took till about my mid-20s to start to accept and know what I needed to do. And that was right when I started to break into the industry. And at the time I saw nobody, there was very few positive women represented in action sports. There was definitely no queer women, and then certainly no trans women. So I was convinced that like when I would come out, I would just lose my career, lose my friends, lose the sports that I loved, and just not seeing anybody like me was what made me feel that way. And then now, yeah, it's the safety thing. Whenever I'm looking for spaces that I feel comfortable in, it's looking to see like, even as simple of like a pride flag, or something like that, just to know like, oh, hey, well, they're thinking about it. And, one thing I want to give a huge shout out to the women's mountain bike community has just totally, since I've come out, has been my home and my safe space. And I just love it, and I want to bring all of the energy that's in this tent to the entire industry, because that's what
I think mine was money. I couldn't afford Roam, and a lot of the women that I work with and a lot of the young girls that I work with, we can't afford to come to Roam. I can afford $300, but I did it. I went to my first Roam because I had to budget it out. And only because on the Navajo Nation, I felt I was the only Native woman that was out riding bikes at a different level. My boyfriend was a former racer, and he's Navajo also. So he started taking me out on bike races. And he said, just remember, we'll be the only brown people out here. And I thought, oh my gosh. So when I went to my first race in Phoenix, I was one of 6 women. And but what was awesome about it was I was maybe one of 3 in my age category, and I podiumed. I might have been last, But I came back and I would tell the girls, I would tell the kids, hey, I podiumed this weekend. And they look at me and you? And, yeah, me, I podium. And I think because I was so proud of it that the kids, they love it. When you're proud, happy, and confident about yourself, they love that. So, but my biggest barrier has always been affording what comes with bikes when you start mountain biking. But we've been fortunate and blessed with people that just came behind us and just supported us with our first Roam. And I just have to thank Ash and Andy, because that's where I met them. And coming to Roam Fest for the first time, I mean, for me, it was like, oh, all these women are out here. I went home and I said, there's women that are out there riding. I mean, I learned how to fix a flat from a woman. I learned this from a woman. I was learning a lot of things from my boyfriend because he's a mechanic, so it's different. And I had to tell him it's different because this is how I learned to do it differently from a female. Of course, they hate it, but I love it. And then I teach that back to the young girls. But sometimes the affordability of the biking industry is tough for us. But with the support of a lot of organizations, it's been amazing, and I'm thankful for that.
Everyone can breathe.
That was really making me Claudia, it's so funny that you mentioned that because I did my first race this summer and I made podium. Nobody needs to know I was the only woman who showed up. But that's the important part, right, Tina? Just show up. So I think, yes, safe, yes, representation, yes, funding, and with the experience that I've had, I think it's a lot of like, what are the real intentions behind the people who are asking us to step into this space? And am I going to be tokenized, or am I going to be used for funding or charity? And do you really want me there? Like, are you creating a space intentionally for me to then be able to be who I am and have other people who also are there with me in that space?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, can you hear me out? Okay. It's so hard to tell. This is so different than Zoom. You know, for folks in larger bodies, I think the barriers, a lot of them are about physical equipment. Bikes have weight limits. Wheels have even more restrictive weight limits. Components can have weight limits, things like seat posts and saddles. And then to get equipment that does suit a larger body, it can often be a lot more expensive. So the barrier, a lot of the time, you know, there's certainly a cultural barrier around who's considered an athlete, who looks like an athlete, who's allowed to ride bikes for fun versus who's supposed to ride bikes because it's, you know, to lose weight or something. But at the end of the day, the physical machine of the bike is a weight-bearing machine, and so that is a huge limitation, and one we're working on with companies. And I'm excited to say that it's changing. And I think that clothing companies are also along for the ride on that and creating more inclusive, you know, clothes. And it matters in mountain biking. It's about safety. You know, there are no plus size, you know, knee pads or elbow pads. Most folks in larger bodies can't find that equipment. So that's just a safety concern.
I'm going to keep you going. I think you just touched on a really good point where things are changing, and I think everyone has seen in the last few years, more people are talking, more people are getting uncomfortable, and that's what we need to be doing to actually create change. And I think I've always stood by conversation with other people is the one way that we could actually change things in this community and in this world. And you talking about the things that are getting better in this industry, I think is a really good foresight for a lot of people to see. Not that there's a light at the end of the tunnel or that there could ever be one, but I think having these things to look forward to and recognizing, I think, is a really big step for people in diverse communities to see that it's not always going to stay the same. So for everyone, what is something that you've seen in this community, in the cycling industry, or within the communities themselves that you're really proud of and that you would have never even thought would have happened 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, yesterday, any of that? Today, yeah.
Yeah, I want to recognize, I'm a white person with a ton of privilege, and I'm also what's considered small fat, so there are people much larger than me that experience a lot more structural forms of oppression and physical forms of access issues. So I start with that to say it's easy for me to see the light, and easy for me to see that things are changing, because they're changing in a way that includes me, but it doesn't mean that it includes, people of color that are in larger bodies or people in larger bodies than my own. I think I will say with that's kind of a bad way to start the answer to your hopeful question. but I say that all, and then, for me, seeing that that companies are listening, there are companies working right now to increase the structural weight limits of bikes to include past the 2XL into 3XL. Shredley's here, and they're one of the companies that's doing that. So I think just seeing that physical inclusion, but I have to say that having the film that you all saw yesterday and the reaction, that has been the most profound shift for me to see of, if I had seen a film like that as a kid or heard the reactions that everyone's had that's come up to me today, like how big of a shift that would have been for me to hear these positive reactions to something like that, when often we think about people in bigger bodies in a really negative way. So.
I do want to say quickly, that was Kailey's first time seeing the film with a live audience. So, amazing job.
Well, I want to say thank you for acknowledging your privilege. One thing that we say on a committee that I'm on is that everybody comes in the room with privilege. And so I myself have privilege. And when I walk into rooms, I want to recognize and acknowledge those, maybe not out loud, but I do want to have an acknowledgement of those so that I understand where I'm coming from and where others are coming from. So thank you so much for acknowledging your privilege, so vulnerably in this group. Thank you. Your question was, what are we getting right? What is the bike community getting right now? I am feeling...
It's okay if your answer is nothing. So
I am feeling like the bike community is acknowledging harm. Some are, and making plans for how to really make change. I don't know if obviously we have not arrived. We are still driving there, and we're just at the start of our journey. But I guess it's nice to just get in the car and crank the engine, right? And I think that's, unfortunately, and I don't want to be like a person who is bringing it down, but I think we're just we got in the car and we put the keys in the ignition. There is so much to be done, but that's a big step too, to be at a point where you're acknowledging, to be at a point where you're like, wow, this all looks like men. Let's work to get women out there, and what are the barriers, and are we the gatekeepers, and who are we letting in? And then figuring out, okay, where do we go from there? And I think we're just at that point of where do we go from there? We've acknowledged it, we see it, now where do we go from there?
I think to build on that, you know, one of the things that I really like to kind of point to is, I think as we can see in this space, you know, and all of us up on this stage, and then all of the women here, we're all here in the bike industry doing the work. And I think I think there's some things to be celebrated, but I think also it's time for the bike industry to start shifting resources. You know, funding us, funding us as athletes, funding us as storytellers, funding our organizations. Because I think all of us were going around sharing like our like what we do, and I think all of us were like, we each have like basically 3 9-to-5 jobs. And like that's not sustainable long term. Like we all need resources from the bike industry, and it's there. And you know, one example that I want to sort of point to is in like the women's freeride movement. You know, with Formation, you saw that video, right? That was resources going to female athletes. And there is a whole movement, and I actually had the fortunate opportunity to participate in Hang Time, which was a women's jump jam put on by Hannah Bergman and Bellingham. And, you know, it was this surreal moment because the way trans women are framed in media is like as a threat, and like we're encroaching upon women's sport, and like all of this stuff that like is really hard to not internalize. And then Hannah personally invited me to that, and like I got to spend a weekend learning and riding with some of the best women in the sport, and I did not think about being trans once. And I was able to like push myself as hard as I possibly could as an athlete, and not like worry about, am I gonna cause controversy? And like, you know, to me, I think what we're seeing in the women's freeride movement is resources being given to women in leadership, and we're creating a space that's welcoming, and we're creating a sport in the way that we want to create it. And like that's at the top of the sport, and I acknowledge I'm really privileged to have that access, and that's why I want to be visible, to show like if I can be welcome here, you can too. But like we need those resources to trickle out across the entire sport. So I think that's one space where we're getting it right, but we need so much more.
I am so new to this space and so new to this like biking industry and this community, but I think it is also a benefit to be able to look at the bigger picture. And the way that I got into this space was because I have lived in my community for 10 years, and it's Summit County. So if you're not skiing or snowboarding, you're mountain biking. I had never tried it. I had never had the access to it or the friend to say, let's try it. And so during that time, like 10 years in Summit County, I was a teacher, and I developed really close relationships with a lot of our kids and their families, Spanish speaking and any other language you can think of, and English speaking. I worked at a dual language school. I developed a dance program after school for youth and adults, and I developed so many deep connections with a lot of our community of immigrants because of that, because we allowed a space to be able to come and share our culture through dance. And speaking about my work, the last role that I had was a family liaison, welcoming new immigrants into our community and listening to their stories. And when I was talking about this, there was a board member there for the organization that I work for who said, you have all the skills that so many organizations are looking for that cannot be easily taught or easily attained. And for him to recognize that, was probably the first person who had ever done that, and said, we need you because the mountain biking, you can learn. Anybody can learn. But the other skills that you have, such as building connections with the people we are trying to serve, not everybody has that, and not everybody can learn that. And to be able to put a person in leadership based on recognizing those skills as valuable for the first time, it's like, more people need to do that. So here I am. And yes, I can learn the mountain bike.
I just wanted to echo, I think you touched upon something really important, is the power of an invitation. And I think I've been able to benefit a lot from people proactively inviting me into spaces that like I didn't think I was welcome in. And I think that's a really important thing. Like, it's so cool to hear somebody was like, hey, come in because like you're gonna be good and you can learn to bike. And I think it's like really, that's an important, I think for all of us, I bet each one of us probably has that invitation moment where all of a sudden is like, oh, this is a space I can exist in, and that switch flips. And I think that's like a really important takeaway for anybody who has privilege. Think about how you can invite those who are underrepresented into this space, because oftentimes I don't think we know we can exist here until that invitation comes from somebody with privilege, which is unfortunate, but I think that's a way you can use your privilege.
But yeah, and I wouldn't say it's unfortunate. I think I mean, it's the reason why I'm here tonight in Rome, because I did receive that invitation, and I wasn't alone. We have a whole group. Where are you? You received that invitation. But it's that awareness of how diverse is your network? Because there are people getting invitations, right? But it might be the same type of people getting that invitation. So how diverse and how wide is your network? And if you are really creating these spaces, you need to widen your network.
And I think the way in which you can think out of not just like an invitation of, oh, can you come to this? Like, invitations to places can be in many ways, like I spoke of before. Like, if all of your flyers show white males jumping off big rocks, then you're going to be like, oh, this is a place for white males that jump off of big rocks. Okay, well, let's bring it like similarly. If all your flyers only just show white women shredding, then I think to myself, oh, that's an invitation to white women who like to shred. But if you can show, the invitation is in representation. So if you can show that this is an event for all types of people, through your marketing materials, through what your Instagram looks like, through what, and maybe this is a space that is going to be dominated by white women, but are you lifting up voices of other types of athletes, right? Like, if only white women are showing up to Roam Fest, that didn't bother me one bit. But I would feel more comfortable if I saw that Roam Fest is still in the business of lifting up the voices of people who look different, who are also on mountain bikes. And so that's an invitation. I'm like, okay, that's a place I want to be. That's a place I want to visit.
For me, I got tired of not being invited. I just came. I showed up at the first Roam Fest, and I just said, I don't care if I'm the only brown person. But when I showed up, I was the only brown person. And it was intimidating, but I've learned that I'm going to show up no matter if I'm not invited or not. I am going to show up, and I'm going to show you that you're on land that my ancestors have been on. And I was sharing with a group with Isabella. We had a little ride earlier, and I said, I don't know why I felt intimidated, but when I ride with our group, with our Navajo group, one thing that we do is they always tell us, when you go out and ride on land, the minute you feel that dirt, that ground, you scream. You scream when you're going downhill, when you're running, make that scream, because it's your lungs was your first breath when you came, and you call this Mother Earth, and you're opening up the deities to come out and bless you, that you're out there, that you're breathing that air, you're breathing in Mother Nature. And I was telling Isabel, I should have done that. I kind of thought that, and I'm in my deep inside, I wanted to share that, but I thought, no, I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. Actually, I should make you feel uncomfortable. every time you go out and ride, please take off your shoes, feel the dirt. That's Mother Nature. And for me, every time we go ride, that's what we do is we take off our shoes and we make sure we feel the dirt that we ride on and are blessed with. We're all blessed with what's here. And so, I don't know why I say I'm thankful I'm here. I'm like, actually, thank me that you're here. And I think maybe that's the uncomfortability of when someone like me speaks up in a group like this, and then I feel a little like, oh God, my God, I start to backpedal. But I was glad when I was talking to these ladies, and they were just saying, no, speak up. We need to feel uncomfortable in this kind of environment. And that I'm going to keep showing up. You don't have to invite me. I will keep showing up. And I'm going to bring more of my ladies to some of these events. Whether we can afford it or not, we might just show up. Sorry, Ash.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. And please do show up. We'll always take space. I think you just unknowingly segued into exactly what I wanted to ask, and mentioning that we should thank you for this land, because all native land, and this is what we are riding on, going into equity and what the cycling community can do in that space, and equity, not equality, because there's a big difference in this space of what we're doing, because we aren't trying to become equal. No one is equal. We all have intersectionality in places different backgrounds we're coming from, experiences we've had, and for historically marginalized groups, equity is what we need, and reparations, not to become equal. So with that in mind, and thinking of equity in the space and the work that you all are doing, what do you think of when you think of equity in the cycling community?
You were talking about it earlier. No, I'm not going Talk about these brands and some money.
Equity.
That's right.
Not one size fits all. And in the biking industry, in my community, there's always that middleman, and it's the white man. I don't want the white man to get the money to give me the money. I want the money. Fund me. Don't fund the person that's the middle person. And that always happens with grant proposals. There's always that middle person, and that's what Isabella had mentioned. We feel we're tokenized at that point. And so when I'm invited to something, I always question, am I going to be the Indian token? So, and that's why I say, I'm going to show up. And I don't want to be invited. Well, I love to be invited, but there's places that don't want to see me. On the reservation, I'm a big voice. I might seem a little shy here, but in my community, I'm a big voice. People sometimes don't like to listen to me, and it's usually the men. They don't understand that I know what you're talking about when you're talking about cycling. I know the language now, and so when I start to speak up, I become that bear that speaks up for the women and for my community. So a lot of men don't like that. And when it's a white person, a white male that's running an organization that tokenizes young Indian kids to get funding, I'm pissed. I'm pissed at that. So there are some organizations that I know you all know of that, and I won't mention them. I don't know, maybe I should, but they like to fund a particular white person, and I had to pull away from them because that particular person was not being supportive of biking community in the area that I was working with. So it's really hard, and a lot of the bike industries, they support that. They support that person. And when we come up and talk about our community, they don't want to promote our biking community because they're promoting the other person's biking community who's a non-native. So those are the things that I struggle with. And so when we talk about equity and equality, being a female in the biking world on the reservation, it's tough. It's tough. So the support, social media, please support me, follow me. I mean, it's the support is needed. So one size doesn't always fit everybody in the biking industry, especially in Native communities.
That doesn't mean that some of us didn't sacrifice to get here, right? But I think, we show up and our privileges or lack of privilege has set us up. And now we are trying to, for people who had barriers and hurdles put in their way, like just placed there, not by accident, just put there. Like we now are understanding what that has meant, and now how do we support breaking down those barriers? How do we support getting everybody to this place? How do we get Black folks who are historically, we know the history, we know the trauma, right? Like recognize that and understand what that trauma means. And now how do we put in place, and I think talking about the money is important. I would say for my organization, it's the exact same thing. All money that is not friends and family is funneled in through one white organization. So when we put on clinics, when we do things, the people who give us money, they give it to the white organization, and then the white organization gets to come to our organization and put on the clinic. And so I think a little bit of equity, a little bit of reparations is to have the opportunity to go to organizations like mine and offer those same resources and maybe even more, because sometimes that's what it takes, is more. Like we're all trying to be equal, we're all trying to say, oh, how did she get here? And it's really about that, understanding that historical oppression and understanding that it hasn't always been equal, and understanding that some people are going to need more resources than others to get there. And so I think that's what I'd like to see more of in the biking community, is an understanding of that. Because from what I read from just comments or things that I just even hear, comments under Instagram pages, or, I don't know why I get caught up in that, but sometimes I do, I have to admit. But it is even, women have been so great in the mountain biking community, but I do see this idea of why are they getting more than me? It's really important to just kind of understand why. Yeah.
Yeah, to build on that, one of the things I think a lot about is how, the sport of men's mountain biking has been receiving investment for decades, right? And for much of mountain biking, it was receiving 100% of the investment for decades. So, women's mountain biking as a whole has just started to receive investment. And then for all of our varying identities up here, we're just starting to be even seen in this space. So we've received our communities have received very little, if any, investment, right? So you have one part of the sport that's basically gotten all the money for decades. Then our community as a whole, as women, has just started to get a little bit of the pie, and then underrepresented communities like ours has not even gotten any. So when I think equity, it's start investing in us. and start investing in us understanding that like we're all building a sport here. It's separate from men's mountain biking. We're building women's mountain biking, and we're doing it in a way that's making sure that all of us who represent, you know, our varying communities, our communities are a part of this sport that we're building. So I think that's when I think equity, it's like we got to make up for the lost time here that like we have not been involved in this sport and we have not been supported. And that's why more money needs to be coming into our communities and more money needs to be building our sport, because the participation is the reflection of the investment, not the reflection of the interest in the sport.
So there's a phrase that I learned recently because of what you are saying, is that focusing on equity allows for a feeling of inequity, which is that people are getting more. Why are they getting more? Well, because historically it has been the other way. And then with equity, I also think about, and something that I just learned recently as well, along with Tina, because Tina and I are, I think, sisters from another mother, is thinking of equity as design. So if you have decided to focus to serve a certain community or to provide a certain resources to that community or that population, is it really accessible? Is it really in the design? Does it really serve them? Getting here tonight was even just like weird, because it's me and a group of 5 other Latinas, and then it's like, who else are we leaving out? Because we have other friends who are not Latinas, but the space wasn't created for them, right? Because we are trying to design it for someone who hasn't been getting that before. And so, like, that even makes me nervous, having to go back and explain that, because someone is gonna ask, why didn't I get to go? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like, what does equity look like at an event like this, you know? And what does it look like on the ground? I think you asked earlier, like, what are we doing right? And Roam, one thing I think you all are doing so well here is celebrating every single ride. I think often the rides that get celebrated are a certain type of ride that a certain type of person is on, and that's not the type of ride I'm on, you know? And that's like for a number of reasons, but I think you all have put people in leadership. We had the most badass guide today, Helen, if you're out there, who just like, we were going, you know, I was going slow up the hill, and she was just amping us up. Like, it was like we were at Rampage, you know? And, like, that just, I mean, it's an easier type of equity than this structural form of equity we're talking about. That's so, I mean, we have to do that work, and in some ways it needs to just come first, but because the people that we need here to create that on-the-ground equity at events aren't here yet, because we haven't done that other work yet. But if we do that work and we keep this vibe of celebrating every single ride and having leaders that look like all the types of people that we have here, that we've invited here, or that invite themselves here, you know, I think that feels equitable, even if that means we put a lot of people that maybe go slower into leadership roles, or that look a lot different than we've had, you know. I mean, I feel like today was one of my favorite days of mountain biking, because that's the goal. So I think we're like on the right track, you know, and we've got so much work, but at least we're in the car. Yeah.
So we, unfortunately, I would love to just sit here and talk about all this stuff all night, but we have to start wrapping up. And with our final question, I know it's not, our final question, with all of our communities, I know it's really important to have our own spaces and be in community with other people like ourselves, but that's just not what the world is. And within that, it is weaving all of our communities together, and that comes with allyship. So within allyship, that's a very multifaceted thing as well, and there's lots of different levels of it. But with true, effective, non-performative allyship, what recommendations, tips, suggestions, advice do you have for people in the audience to be true, effective allies to diverse communities?
Yeah, I think once you've invited those folks out, or they've invited themselves, and here you are, for me it's about communicating. My friend Brooke and I were just talking about this today. We can make inclusive group rides by posting the length and the speed that we're going to go on, and this, Roam's been doing a great example of that. You know what you're getting into ahead of time, but we need to do that every time we go out with somebody. Make the space, make sure that the people we're with feel safe to be there. Make sure that everyone's having fun. Communicate about, do we want to ride together? Is it okay if I go faster and you go slower? We'll meet at the top of the hill. Wait for your friends at the top of the hill. For me, folks in larger bodies, we're putting out more watts to get up the hill, and then we have no brakes. So we're trying the hardest out there. So I think those are ways to be an ally, and to treat everyone as if they're supposed to be here, because they are.
I would say it's get more uncomfortable. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable saying this because is this being recorded? But I have to say there's a lot of white folks in my life, a lot. And I just live in a very white community. My partner, my best friend, everyone's white. And I would say this, knowing that, is that I've not seen, rarely, if ever, a white person get the real uncomfortable, right? And that's what true allyship is. When that shit gets so uncomfortable and you're sweating a little and your voice is starting to shake, then that's when you're probably really doing ally work, right? It's not just putting up the black square. It's instead of coming to me after someone said the comment, and saying, oh, I was going to say something because I felt a little weird about that too. It is actually saying something then. They don't need to see women of color sticking up for themselves or sticking up for other women of color. We need white women to stand up for us. And so for me, what is really, really important is when you're out there in the mountain biking community and you see something wrong, say something. If you see something, say something and sweat a little. And if your voice shakes, and I'm there, that is a very proud moment, but that is a moment that I've yet to see.
And I wanted to jump. We were talking a little bit before this, and we were basically the same thing of get uncomfortable. And kind of the personal story, and I heard you mention you've received some microaggressions even throughout this event, and I have too. I was misgendered several times, and it's uncomfortable for me. It's not pleasant. It's not fun, and it's hard for me to correct people at times. This is a safe space, so it's easy for me to kind of just be hey, actually, she, her are my pronouns. But there are times where it's not. And, I challenge every one of you, that's an example for me, but if you hear something like that, jump in and go, actually, her pronouns are she, her, so I don't have to do it. And, if you witness a microaggression against any one of us here, just jump in and say hey, that's not cool, or there's this really great training program called Holla Back. They do bystander intervention, and they give you it's the 5 Ds, and it gives you 5 ways in which you can safely intervene when you witness a microaggression. And I recommend all of you go do that, and it will teach you how to get uncomfortable safely, and also in a way that's respecting of the person's identity that maybe felt that microaggression. And then another way that I challenge you all to go get uncomfortable is in your social media. You know, we all spend a lot of time there looking at our phones. Diversify your feed. You know, I think I would recommend start by following every single one of us up here, and then go into who we follow and follow all of them and see what starts coming through your feed. And you're going to probably get a little uncomfortable. You're going to read our stories, you're going to read our challenges, and you're going to learn. And you're going to start to understand the barriers and challenges that we all go through without having to ask us and make us do the same conversation over and over and over again. So go follow us, go follow our friends, go follow our communities, and do the work of like starting to learn and do that research on your own, and learn how to be allies, because it takes proactive work. So those would be my two kind of like go get uncomfortable in the ways I'd recommend doing it. So thank you for saying that, because it is awesome that you said that. It's important.
I don't know how to ask people to be allies. If you want to help me, if you want to support me, that's up to you. I can't, like I said, you know, if I'm going to do something, I invite myself to do it. For so long, I've sat back and watched and thought, I should go there. Maybe I should do this. If you want to help me, help me. I don't have to ask. I feel like I don't have to ask of you to, you know, help me. You see me up here, you follow me, you'll see what I'm doing. And if you want to be my ally, you want to help me, help me. If I run a fundraising campaign, help me, because you will see the impact that it helps in my community. Today I have a NICA team. I have 5 girls and 1 boy. And I started out with 3 girls a couple years ago. We doubled this year. And today was the race, and I missed it. I'm about to cry because I missed it, and I love seeing them out there. They're young girls that did not know how to ride a bike, and they just started. We crash, we cry, we get back up, but my whole teaching from the bike has always been life skills. When I started the biking program, it was because we had, in every community that I worked with, there was 1 suicide per month, and for us, mountain biking was something that was to build strength in some of the people. And I just thought I was starting a biking program just to go out and have fun. But the response back was that a lot of them joined our biking group because they were battling something. But when they got on the bike and they made that first hill, they said, I made that hill. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was the same way. I can't believe I made that hill. And then there's the next hill. So they know me as, that's just that one hill. They don't know there's more hills. How much further, Claudia? Oh, maybe a couple miles. And 10 miles later, you said, yeah. So it's amazing. So the ally part of it is, if you want to help me, you can help me. Just like I walk into your space, walk into my space, help me in that way. And back to the story of my little rider today. She texted me and she said she did great. She crashed, but she got back up faster than the last time and kept pedaling. That was amazing. On the res, our huge sport is basketball. Basketball is a huge thing on the res. Mountain biking has just become new for a lot of our families and our parents. So this young girl's grandpa showed up at the bike race, and when she came in, she finished. She was telling me this, and she said, Grandpa came to my bike race, and Grandpa said to me, Kailey, you took us everywhere with basketball. I'm so glad you're doing biking. Now we can follow you. Oh, yeah, it breaks my heart. I mean, and it doesn't break my heart, it makes me cry. But it's amazing. It's amazing to see how strong, resilient our kids, our communities are. I don't want to do no poverty porn on, people talk about that on the reservation a lot. We have strong female women that are on bikes and young girls that are on bikes. They just love the sport. And I guess that's my ending with, I don't know what the question was.
And I would follow up with what you said about walk into my space, because I think that is one of the things that makes me as an immigrant so strong. And I think about what you said earlier of, what if I just want to experience mountain biking in my own way, like not the white way that has been put out there, but my own way? What if we just do it Mexican style? What if we add flowers to our helmets? What if you just put someone else to guide the group ride, and it's completely different experience because you're stepping into my space? And one of the things that I tell our coaches all the time is that if you ever get an invitation to a quinceañera or dinner, you cannot not show up. Because if you ever want to put yourself out of your comfort zone and step into their space and try to have to figure out, like, what are these cultural norms that I have no idea? Like, do I eat with my hands or do I use the spoon? Do I step on the dance floor? Do I ask someone? Do I wait to be asked? Like, those are the most, like, safest ways to step outside of your comfort zone and really experience somebody else's culture and somebody else's comfort zone. And so step into those spaces. And I think for me, the power of the bike comes from realizing that because I am an immigrant, because I came to this country and I am biliterate, bilingual, bicultural, I have adapted and have become so resilient, right? So when I think about mountain biking and this like really intimidating sport, I remind myself, there's so many harder things that I've done before. This is nothing. And I tell that to our girls, like, you have done things that are so much harder. And this is where you gain your power back, because you decide when you want to challenge yourself. You decide if you want to get off the bike and walk. You decide if you want to make it up the hill or just halfway up the hill. And then, like, that is the power we have when we are in control of that bike, and we have done things that are harder.
Thank you, everyone. Can everyone please give an amazing round of applause for these women?